President Trump is responding to how sick Americans are of pharma pricing. Thanks very much, Chairman. Good to have you all here for the hearing. Seems to me that pharmaceutical pricing is the decision of the pharmaceutical companies, and Big Pharma would like nothing more than a world in which they control the prices, they have huge sway in this building, and their opposition, if you want to call it that, the concerns on price come from individual patients who have essentially no market power. We've seen really significant pricing abuses by Big Pharma. We pay the highest prices in the world for a great many pharmaceuticals here. President Trump is responding to how sick Americans are of pharma pricing by proposing his executive order to lower it and set U.S. pharmaceutical pricing at international standards. I think that's a signal of how things are going out there. In that environment, a PBM done right is the only institutionally powerful correction to pharma's hegemony over prices. Now, we got a little bit of help by letting Medicare do some negotiation. That's a start. We hope we can do more of that. But other than that, it's just an open field advantage for Big Pharma to roll over individual patients with no structural opposition. So a PBM done right is actually a counterforce to pharma's, should we say, exotic pricing structures, because they're able to buy at scale, because they can apply leverage, because there is excess.
Hello, pristine viewers. Welcome back to the channel. This morning, I want to talk about something that's been burning up the political and healthcare scene lately: pharmaceutical pricing, Big Pharma, and these pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. I just watched a video of Senator Whitehouse grilling these guys in Congress, and I gotta say, there's a lot going on here that needs a straight talk from a right-wing, liberty-loving American. So let's break it down. First off, Senator Whitehouse is all fired up about how Big Pharma controls drug prices and how Americans pay the highest prices in the world. Now, I don't disagree with the idea that drug prices can be outrageous. Healthcare costs in this country are no joke, and this is a big. But we need to remember who's actually behind the wheel. It's not some faceless government agency. It's private companies competing in a free market. Yes, Big Pharma has power, but that power comes from innovation and delivering life-saving medicines that, frankly, don't just appear out of thin air. Whitehouse tries to paint Big Pharma as the villain and PBMs as the only institution standing up to them. He says PBMs can negotiate better prices because they buy at scale and apply leverage. And sure, PBMs can be a check. But are they really the heroes here? From what I see, PBMs operate in a murky middle ground. They have been criticized for lacking transparency and potentially driving up costs by adding layers between the manufacturer and the patient. So, before we crown them champions of the people, we need to ask, are PBMs really fighting for us, or are they just another corporate interest?
Profit baked into the pharma pricing model. They actually can provide a pretty important service. I don't know about you, but when I turn on my iPad, I pretty much always now see an ad paid for by pharma trying to throw PBMs under the bus for pharma's pricing policies. Now, if you're Big Pharma and people are mad about the way you price your drugs and why Americans have to pay more than essentially any other country for pharmaceutical costs, then, as President Trump noticed by announcing this next executive order, there's a pretty fed up public out there. And pharma's response is not to lower its prices, but to move PBMs in the line of fire and try to make them the source of the blame. So I'm sort of watching what looks like a bit of a political strategy by Big Pharma to point the finger at PBMs. There are clearly problems with PBMs, and the worst problem is if the PBMs and Big Pharma are colluding. If the PBMs and pharma are colluding to make the underlying pharmaceutical prices even higher and not complain about the basic pharmaceutical prices, so that they have a bigger margin that they can negotiate for their clients so that they can get a bigger fee, then you have both pharma and PBMs engaged in a essentially collusive enterprise to cheat the American consumer. That behavior we need to get rid of. But the idea that we need to get rid of PBMs when they're the only significant structural pushback on pharma's pricing, I think would be a real mistake. And when I'm seeing Big Pharma, knowing that everybody's mad at them, running all these ads, throwing PBMs in the way of public irritation, as if pharma doesn't control its own pricing. I worry about this. Mr. Scott, who sets the prices for pharmaceutical products?
Drug companies and drug companies alone.
Yeah, and you'd agree with me that if drug companies and PBMs are colluding to keep prices high just to give PBMs a bigger share and kind of a general truce so that consumers still get screwed, that would be an abuse of the PBM model.
And that is not happening, and you're pointing to the advertisements as good evidence there is no general truce. We have been calling actively for drug companies to lower their list prices on all prescription drugs. That's a key part of what we advocate for.
Yep. Well, my time has expired, but I think there's a role for PBMs here, and I think the most important signal we're seeing right now is pharma's ad campaign trying to defend its exotic pricing techniques by putting somebody else in the line of political fire.
Now, the White House goes on about President Trump's executive order to lower drug prices by tying U.S. prices to international standards. I have to say, I was skeptical of this from the start. The government meddling with pricing is a slippery slope. Price controls might sound good on paper, but they often result in less innovation, fewer new drugs, and longer wait times for critical medicines. Do we want to copy the healthcare models of other countries where government bureaucracy slows everything down? I don't think so. And here's where it gets interesting. Big Pharma is running ads blaming PBMs for high prices. White House calls this a political strategy to deflect blame. I think there's some truth to that. It's classic Washington. When pressure mounts, point fingers and divide your critics. But you know what? The real question is, who sets the prices? Mr. Scott in the hearing was clear. Drug companies set prices. If PBMs and pharma were colluding to keep prices high, that'd be a serious problem. But Mr. Scott denies that, saying there's no truce. Personally, I want to see that proved. But the bottom line is that transparency and accountability are what we need. On both sides. Now, here's my take as a right-wing patriot who values free markets and personal responsibility. I don't want government to take over pricing or shove in endless regulations that kill competition. I want innovation rewarded and entrepreneurs empowered to bring new medicines to market. But I also want fairness. Americans shouldn't get gouged just because the market is complicated and dominated by a few big players. If PBMs provide a real service, negotiating better prices, reducing costs, then great. But if they're just middlemen adding confusion and fees, then we need to shine a bright light on them. That means real oversight, not heavy-handed government price controls. And speaking of government, Medicare negotiating drug prices, that's a step in the right direction, but it's just a start. We need more competition, more transparency, and a system where patients, not bureaucrats or corporate middlemen, are in charge of their healthcare choices. Finally, Americans need to stay vigilant. Don't buy the narrative that it's just Big Pharma versus PBMs or that government intervention will fix everything. It's a complex market, and all players have their incentives. Some good, some bad. The best solution lies in empowering patients, encouraging competition, and keeping government from strangling innovation with overregulation. So there you have it. My take on the whole pharma pricing drama. What do you think? Are PBMs heroes, villains, or something in between? Is government price setting the answer or just another problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, like, share, and hit that subscribe button. And remember, stay informed, stay free, and always stand up for American ingenuity and personal liberty. See you on the next episode.